If you keep starting side projects but never finishing them, the problem isn't that you're lazy. You just don't have the right system in place. Over 20 years as both an enterprise developer and indie builder, I've shipped more projects than I can count. And the difference between finishing and abandoning comes down to 5 specific habits. Let me show you the system. Step 1 is to build the boring parts first. We all jump into new projects excited about the fancy new features we're going to be writing or some exciting new tech we're going to get to be able to use. And then at some point you run into something that's difficult or boring, and we decide to just kick it forward into the future and instead focus on the easy parts. But if you keep doing that, then at the end, all that's going to be left is the hard and boring stuff. And that last 20% is going to be a tough slog to get through because that's all you have to work on now is the hard and the boring. And you're much less likely in that case to actually finish your project now. This is something from my own personal experience. I know that I try to move fast, and so that means I tend to kick those hard and boring parts down the road. But I consciously try to override that tendency by sprinkling in some of those more difficult tasks throughout the entire project timeline. So that means that, I just finished something new and exciting, and so now I have that energy from just finishing that to jump into something that's more difficult. And at the same time, knowing that once I finish that difficult task, at the other end of it is something new and exciting to work on, something I'm excited to work on, that gives me the motivation to get finished with that hard, difficult task. The second step is to define done before you even start writing any code. Figure out what your minimum viable product is and write it down. My personal strategy is I actually have a to-do markdown file inside of my project, and in there I write down all the high-level features that I need to work on before I consider this thing to be done. No fancy project management applications, no swim lanes, just a markdown file. And then as I work through the project, I expand on the high-level features in the to-do list and break them out into subtasks and individual things I actually need to get done. And then I now have a prioritized list of things to work on. And then when I finish a task, I remove it from the file. So this file is constantly updated as I work on the project. I also keep sections in the file for future improvement. This way, if I have any ideas, I can still throw them down somewhere and not lose track of them. But they're going to be further down in the file that I'm not going to be touching. Everything that matters is the top of the file, the original MVP that you decided at the beginning of your project and what you have to get done. Anything further down, that's just something you can maybe do in the future if you come back to the project. And one other tip about planning your MVP, try to cut your scope in half and then try cutting it one more time. Remember, you're trying to ship a knife, not a Swiss Army knife. The third tip is to set a public deadline. Tell people what you're working on and what your timeline is. In the corporate world, your motivation to meet a deadline is to keep your job and to get your paycheck. But when you're building just for yourself, that motivation isn't there, and so sometimes you need to find a replacement for that. And making your deadlines public is often a great option for that motivation. And the term public is going to be subjective. For instance, for me, I just happen to tell those closest to me what I'm working on and approximately, what my timeline is. But I've certainly used public accountability for good effect. In my 20s, I decided to start working out, and I casually told friends and coworkers what I was doing. Knowing that I publicly told everyone about my new habit made it a lot harder for me to skip workouts because I didn't want to admit to people that I gave up. And so eventually it just became a habit that I still do to this day. So find what works for you. Maybe it's telling close family members, maybe it's telling your friends, coworkers, or maybe it's just going on social media and talking about it. If it helps you work harder towards your goal, I say go for it. Step number 4 is something you've heard me say multiple times in other videos. Avoid unnecessary complexity. Don't try to build microservices. Don't build component libraries. Avoid the doing it right rabbit hole. Your entire goal is to ship. So focus on making your code workable, not perfect. Remember, perfect is the enemy of good. Recognize the trade-offs that any additional complexity adds to your project and if it's worth the benefits, or if there are any alternatives that are better off using. For instance, in my last project, I was tempted to build my own authentication system. Instead, I saved days of reading through documentation, integrating libraries, figuring out what plugins to use for magic links by going with Supabase, which already had authentication built in. In corporate, we had entire teams to manage all that extra complexity, but as a solo dev, every extra layer we add is a tech debt that we have to pay ourselves. So before adding any complexity, I ask, will this save me more time than it takes me to build it in the next 30 days? If not, then I definitely skip it. This last tip you've probably heard 1,000 times before, but I'm going to take it further. I'm sure you've heard people tell you work on your app every single day, even if it's just for a few minutes. The goal here is to make building a habit, something you do every day, and that's a great starting point. But if you want to consistently finish projects, you need to use that building habit as a stepping stone to something even better. You need to make shipping a habit. Your goal is to become a person that sees finishing a project as a habit, not this huge milestone looming in the future. It's just one more task that you get done as part of your project. At the end, you ship it, you finish it. And every time you finish an app or a version of your app, it just reinforces you're someone that ships. And that makes it that much easier for you the next time around. After all, you've done it before, you can do it again. So as you're working on your project every day, remember to run through your to-do lists, cross off those features for your MVP, and then once those lists are empty, all you have left to do is ship it. You've just proven that you're someone that finishes. Now, go and do it again. Those are the 5 tips. But here's one bonus tip that might be the most important one. Know when to kill projects. Not everything deserves to be finished. Sometimes the right move is to recognize an idea isn't working, to learn from it what you can, and to move on to the next project. The goal isn't to finish every project, it's to finish the right projects. Don't let sunk costs keep you grinding on something that should be abandoned. But if your project is worth finishing, now you have the system for it. Do the boring parts first, have a clear definition of done, have a public deadline, avoid unnecessary complexity, and ship like it's routine. If this helps you, subscribe for more and leave a comment. I want to know what projects you're finally going to ship. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.